I want to see a lot of audience here right now. I want to see, yes, Dravit, I see your hello here. Um, Waiting for all the audience to join, and we'll be starting shortly with Nilay today. I want to see more viewers. I want to see more comments in the comment section today. Super excited to come up with these 5 checklist items that you need to take care of before going into your technical interviews. So I'm waiting for the audience to join, and we'll be starting with Nilay very shortly. I'm sure that all of you are excited today. I'm sure that the celebrations are in order. Ganesh Chaturthi has started, and we're welcoming Lord Ganesh today. With that excitement, I want to see everyone commenting 5 in the comment section to know the 5 checklist items that you need to tick off before going into your technical interviews. Nilay will be joining us shortly, and we'll start talking about these very soon. I'm waiting for the audience to join, and we'll be starting soon. Happy Ganesh Chaturthi to you too, Dravid. I want to see some people write 5 in the comment section below, where we'll be seeing your excitement about this webinar today with Nilay Shrivastava. Awesome. This is super amazing. I see a few viewers coming up. I see more viewers joining in. This is great. So, very happy Ganesh Chaturthi to all of you. I hope that all of you are celebrating safely. Today, we are going to be talking to Mr. Nilay Shrivastava about 5 items that you need to tick off before your technical interviews. So, yes, I see a big 5 here. Thanks, Fahad. Great, Badal. This is amazing. This is amazing. We're talking to Nilay Shrivastava today. Nilay is someone who's working with Adobe right now. He's working on machine learning, and he's super passionate about mathematics, physics, and of course computers. Nilay will be joining us very shortly, and we'll be talking to him about 5 checklist items that you need to tick off while going towards your technical interviews. So yes, I see a lot of viewers giving a very good, very big 5 here. Thanks, Dravid. Thanks, Badal. Kirtana, thanks. So yes, we'll start very shortly. We'll start this webinar with Nilay now. Nilay will be talking to us about 5 checklist items to tick off your before your interviews, which are going to be technical. Let's invite Nilay to this call now.
Hi, Gopi. Thanks for the nice introduction.
Hi, Nilay. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited. Our audience is also very excited to have you over today. I'll open the podium to you, Nilay, and you can take over the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Gopi, once again. And thanks to Newton School for inviting me for this webinar. Oh, so the title of my presentation would be Acing the Technical Interview, the obvious and yet not so obvious things. So if you go online, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you have spent a considerable amount of time searching for tips to crack interviews, and you might have come across things such as what sort of data structures you should be well versed with, and which coding questions are something you should practice before going to any interview. So my talk would be something would be a bit different from those talks, because I think I can, if I'm just repeating what those guys have told, then I wouldn't be adding to the value. and I wouldn't be doing justice to your time here. So over here, I would be discussing certain things which seem, which may seem obvious to the interviewer, but due to the lack of emphasis being put on those things, isn't quite obvious to uh, the general audience that is preparing for the interview. So I'll just share my screen in a moment. I hope my screen is visible right now.
Yeah, Nilay, your screen is visible.
Okay. So yeah, acing the technical interview, the obvious and yet not so obvious things. So a fair amount of warning, like a sort of a disclaimer. All the things which I mentioned here are something which I have learned from first-hand experience. These are not things which I'm quoting from what I've heard some other XYZ person talk. So you might find things, you might find certain areas that you may disagree with, or there would be some particular content out in the internet that might dispute what I say here. But all I would say that this is something which I've experienced by both being by being on either side of the table. So going first, the first and the most important thing, and something which has I would love to give a great amount of emphasis on, is that you should come prepared. You could say that, oh, come on, Nilay, that's something very obvious. Of course, we are going to, if we are preparing for an interview, then we would be prepared by the time we are taking that particular interview. But yeah, there are, I've seen a lot of situations wherein the candidate is not as well versed with all the things which I'm going to mention. And those are the things you should really emphasize on, and you should really make sure that you are done away with before coming on to the interview. So the first and foremost thing is you should make sure is that you should be thorough with the syllabus. By syllabus, I mean you should be ready with, you should have practiced a decent amount of questions from all sorts of sites, maybe Newton School, Geeks for Geeks, or any other website which you can find, or your college textbooks. You should be well versed with time complexities. You wouldn't want to be in a situation wherein the interviewer asks you what the time complexity of binary search is, and you're still thinking or figuring out the intermediate calculations. Those things should be on your tip. You should also go, and before taking the interview, like a week before or maybe a few days before, you should also go online and check the past interview experiences. Those are things which are written by people who have given interviews with the same company. Now, the idea behind checking the past interview experiences is that you get a sort of you get a decent amount of idea as to what are those topics that that particular company would be focusing on. Now, I can tell you, so suppose there is this company that works on networking a lot. So for companies that work on networking, questions that directly entail to network and communications, and questions in form of data structures would be really important for that particular company. For instance, you might find network companies working in the field of networking to be more into asking questions on graphs, or maybe some sort of traversal or optimization. So that would give you a fair amount of idea as to what to expect during the interview, and that could be a game changer if in a lot of situations. And I mean, you would be surprised to know that a lot of people who give an interview, and I give an interview, sometimes aren't aware of the code editor or ID on which they are going to take that particular interview or that particular exam. For instance, these days companies prefer to take interviews on HackerRank's portal. So you should be well aware of what sort of functionality is present on HackerRank. What are the do's and the don'ts that you should follow while coding on that particular portal. So you don't want to waste your time figuring out where is the run button, where is the test button, and how to debug your code, whether the code has autocomplete or not. So these things might seem very unimportant, but trust me when I say this, do make sure that you are like you have just checked out these things, and you are not in a situation that you are facing an entirely new platform on the day of the interview. Another important thing that you should come prepared with is just look up what company you are giving the interview for. Like uh, suppose you are interviewing with Adobe. Find out, like, just look up its Wikipedia page, find out what sort of technologies Adobe works on, what teams Adobe has, like how has Adobe been performing in recent years, what's the experience of their employees, what is Adobe's work culture known for. So I mean, what this enables you is it gives out a message that, okay, this particular candidate, it gives out a message to the interviewer that this particular candidate knows what he is applying for. So it would really piss the interviewer off if he finds out that you don't even have an inch of an idea about the company, about his or her own company. It's okay if you do not understand the business practice, like suppose you do not understand what a hedge fund is, you do not understand what algorithmic trading, that's okay. But just keep a small idea, like an overall general idea as to what is that particular company's business. Another thing which I would emphasize in this particular section is, do come up with do prepare your introduction. Now, introduction is the portion of the interview which students don't really take seriously. Okay, I mean, I never used to take it seriously while I was in college. But later I realized that interview is the time, the introduction period is the time of the interview, is that particular in time interval which totally belongs to you. That is the portion of the whole interview in which you are in command rather than the interviewer. So what you would want to do in that time frame is that you would want to project yourself as an ideal candidate. You would want to project your personality as a confident and as a potentially great hire to the company. And also you would want to indulge, would want to interest the interviewer into what sort of skills you bring for the company. So say, suppose I've done an XYZ project in React. So I should, while you are doing your introduction, make it a point to emphasize on your best projects. And how do you go about doing that? Make sure that the interviewer knows what sort of problems you faced while developing that particular project, and how did you struggled, or how did you work hard in order to solve or resolve that particular problem. So that would make the interview more interesting. And as you know, like, the first impression is the last impression. So if you get off with a good impression, that would certainly add up like to the final scores which the interviewer might be giving. Moving on to the next point, it's to relook your resume and projects. I have seen a lot of candidates while taking mock interviews that they aren't really aware of what they have written in their resume. So what people generally do is, like, even I have done that while I was in college initially, while I was in first or second year. So what I did was I just looked up on the internet what languages, what technologies are most popular, were the most popular in that time. And then I just wrote them down. Like, even if I have just written a small code snippet in that particular technology or in that particular programming language, I felt confident enough then to write them down in the resume. What this does is, like, a resume is a document that is taken very seriously by a company that is hiring. So they want to, like, they are of the opinion that whatever word you have written in the resume is true to to all extents. There's no exception to what you have written in your resume. So say if you have written JavaScript, make sure that you actually understand the programming language. Let it not be the case that you have just copied code from Stack Overflow, just pasted that into your project, and now you're claiming that you know JavaScript. That would be a deal breaker for the company if the interviewer finds it out. So just as I said, make sure the programming languages which you have written are the languages which you know. So there's this misconception among students that if you write a lot of programming languages in that area of the resume, that increases your chance for getting hired. I think it's the opposite. Like the more programming languages you write, all the interviewer has to do in order to check your knowledge in that particular programming language is to just look up on the internet. The interviewer has this advantage, wonderful advantage of looking up on the internet during the interview, which you don't. He'll just Google interview questions for XYZ programming languages. And trust me, programming languages in themselves are very intricate, very complicated sometimes, and they have certain features which aren't shared by all general purpose programming languages. So you wouldn't have, say, for example, if you take the case of C++ and JavaScript, C++ has a class-based inheritance model. JavaScript inherently does not have a class-based inheritance model. It follows a model called prototypical inheritance, which not a lot of languages have currently, not a lot of popular programming languages. So it's very easy to spot a person if he to just get to know whether the person really knows his technology by heart, or is he just faking it. So you wouldn't want to be in a situation wherein the interviewer finds out that you have next to no idea about what you have written into your resume. Also, while mentioning your projects in your resume, don't just mention what your project does. Also, make it a point that you write what problems you faced while doing that project, what interesting hacks, what interesting algorithm, or what interesting tech you applied in order to solve those problems. So the thing is that whatever projects undergrads do these days, most of the projects aren't something that a company would be interested in acquiring. That's a fact. No company would be interested in acquiring a to-do list. So what's the use of writing a to-do list project, like doing a project based on to-do list? The idea, the thing which the interviewer mainly focuses upon while looking at those projects is whether the candidate is aware of the problems designing that particular system or not. Like say, if I talk about to-do list, then you should be aware of things such as local storage, login system if you want your to-do list to be shared by a lot of users, and other things such as maybe not in the case of to-do list, but in some applications, even concurrency might be a very important thing, or might be a bottleneck. So make sure that your project description contains these information. Your project description shouldn't just be somewhat on these lines. I developed a music app that plays XYZ kind of music. You have to tell the interviewer, you have to convey this information, that how did you achieve what you are claiming that you have achieved. Also, something which is related to the project part of the resume is it's advisable that you open source your code on maybe GitHub or any other platform like SourceForge, and if possible, make it online. Like you could use a feature of GitHub called github.io for hosting static pages, so that the interviewer gets a first-hand idea, a first-hand account of a first-hand proof, in fact, of whether you have made that project or you have just written it for the sake of writing. So when you just put those projects online, that's sort of a certificate that yes, you have done this particular work, and like the interviewer can be assured that what you have written under the project section of your resume is true, is completely true. And just something which is related to putting your projects online is that I've noticed, like these days you find resumes that are interactive, in the sense that these resumes contain hyperlinks that point to different website or like your profile. So make sure that if that the project link, the link to your project's URL is working and your project looks good. It casts a positive impression in the mind of the person who is checking out that particular app or that particular tool. So what happened during a particular mock interview was that this interviewee, he told me to check out his project at xyz.com, and when I opened it, the website was in a terrible state. Like there were problems with image alignment. The color pattern was a bit awkward for the app which he was claiming to have made. So, that casts a negative impression in my mind. So I would think that, okay, this guy does not know how to present a product or present a tool. Maybe he hasn't given the full, he hasn't given his 100% while working on this project, or maybe he has just made this project up last night just in order to show it off. So just keep in mind that your project should be the project which you are presenting or the project whose URL you are giving works properly. It looks good in the first one. Now going to the third point, which I think is the most important point or the most important thing in this particular presentation. It's the fact that interviewer is your friend. Not a lot of people consider, not a lot of graduates or undergrads consider that to be true. But trust me, while sitting on the other end of the interviewing table, I realized that as an interviewer, what I'm doing is I'm essentially hiring a colleague. You probably won't be directly reporting to me, but you would probably be working on the same project which I'm working on right now. You have to, this is very important mindset of the interviewer, which you should consider. So it's not the case that the interviewer is trying to demotivate you, or he's just searching for reasons not to select you. You have to while you are approaching your interview, just think that the person sitting on the other end of the table has been through the same process which you are undergoing right now. So he knows what sort of problems which you are facing. He knows he would have a fair amount of idea about what you would be thinking if that particular question comes up. And he knows what sort of approaches undergrads think of while attacking the problem which he is about to get. So extending on this, just after you keep this in mind that your interviewer is your friend, just try to take advantage of this fact. Like how you can do that, you should ask relevant questions if you don't understand the problem. That's, I think, the most important checklist in this particular slide. It happens. It's pretty normal that an interviewer presents you some problem verbally and you are not able to figure out, or you do not understand how the sample test cases are working, or what is the meaning of a certain word or a certain phrase in the problem statement. It's perfectly okay to ask your interviewer as to what that particular thing means. The interviewer would not dock your points just because you are asking a good question. Now, the important thing is that you should ask relevant questions. Your questions shouldn't, while you ask those questions, it shouldn't appear to the interviewer that you are asking just for the sake of asking. Like a lot of online tutorials on how to crack coding interviews, or on a lot of websites, they mention this fact that ask interviewer relevant questions. The interviewer is aware that such a thing is being propagated in the society. So he knows, if you sit on the other end of the table, it's very easy to spot whether the question is genuine or has the question been asked with the purpose of just just settling down, or maybe just casting a positive impression, like a fake question, a question that is not supposed to be asked, or question that is so obvious, like uh, that has already been answered in the problem statement. For instance, you wouldn't want to, like, an example of a not so relevant question is, uh, am I allowed to use arrays in this problem or not? See, a coding question has been given to you. You are allowed to use any sort of any programming feature, any feature of your programming language of your choice, and it's all up to you. And if the question demands, like if the interviewer wants you not to use that a particular data structure, he'll mention that himself in the very beginning. You wouldn't have to ask that particular question to the interviewer. So make sure what you are asking is relevant and is not just a question asked for the sake of asking. Second point is, ask for hints if you are stuck. I have been to interviews, I've given interviews wherein I did not have any clue as to how to answer or how to solve this or that particular problem. It's that's the moment when you should take advantage of the fact that the interviewer is a person who is not much older than you in most cases, and you should go ahead and ask him for hints. No interviewer would dock points for asking hints. And in fact, the interviewer would feel obliged and would love to help you out. And in fact, like what the interviewer, when you ask for a hint, what the interviewer gets time for is that he gets to evaluate you more on other aspects apart from solving the coding question. So it might happen that the question which he has given to you is really difficult, and he might even know, he'll probably know that this problem isn't solvable in the amount of time which I have given this person. He might be looking out for your thought process. He might be looking out for how you go ahead and solve a problem which is seemingly difficult to solve in that particular time constraint, with that particular time constraint. So when you ask for hint, the interviewer gets an opportunity to evaluate you on your thought process. So say if you ask for a hint, whether is there any recursive, or is there any substructure of the problem that is getting repeated or anything, he gets to know whether you have understood the problem correctly or not. He gets to know the kinds of solutions that are there in your mind and that you haven't coded yet. So these can allow you to gain extra points from the interviewer. It might be possible that your interviewer might might attach a lot of points to the fact whether you are able to solve your problem or not. It happens. Like a few interviewers do exist who are just concerned with whether you solve the given problem in the required time frame or not. That's okay. You can't do much in that scenario. But trust me, a lot of interviewers also look for the thought process. So in case you are stuck somewhere, in case you are not able to take the next step, or you do not understand, or there is something which you are missing, maybe a syntax, maybe some function which you know that exists, but you just cannot recall the name of that function from the standard library, then feel free to ask him. Like if he finds it a genuine, like if he thinks that it's okay to provide you with that information, then he'll definitely give you. Otherwise he'll just say that, okay, I can't give you this particular information as a hint, and you have to solve the problem and then you'll have to solve the problem in some other way. The third point is that you should code only after you have explained your algorithm, the procedure which you are thinking in your mind to the interviewer. This has a twofold advantage. So the first is that suppose you're very confident about your solution, and once you have read the problem statement, you spend 1 or 2 minutes, and just after 1 or 2 minutes, you are very excited. Okay, this is the problem which I've seen earlier, and you just start coding it. While coding, for like 10-15 minutes, you realize that okay, there are certain test cases which you hadn't thought before, but which are now making your code complicated. You try to patch those problems, or you try to take care of those test cases using if-else pattern, but then your code grows monstrous, like the code complexity grows like monstrously or exponentially, and you are now stuck in a situation where you do not know what the next step would be, or what would be the thing you need to write in order to complete the program. So what you have done is you've wasted 20 or 30 minutes of the interview. You won't be getting those 20-30 minutes back. And if you just go there and if you just explain him what you did, that does not create a good impression of you as a candidate. So make sure. So this is the first. So if you would have just explained your algorithm in the first go, maybe the interviewer would have pointed out certain misconception or certain things which you did not understand or you did not account for before you would have started coding. So that would save a lot of time. Secondly, the second importance of describing your algorithm before writing the code is that in certain situations it might be the case that writing out the code in C++ or Java might take time which you do not have currently. So maybe your interview just has 10 minutes left. Maybe you are on your second problem of the interview. You just have 10 minutes left. It's like for sure that you won't be able to completely code out the solution, and you won't be able to debug if there are any bugs. So just make it a point to explain your algorithm to the interviewer. So that gives the interviewer a chance to mark you on the correct mark you on the fact that you came up with the correct algorithm. And since when you explain your algorithm, you yourself would realize what mistakes you're making, and it's perfectly okay to admit mistakes during the interview. You can just say, okay, I just realized I missed XYZ case, or I just realized that this constraint wouldn't be satisfied. That's perfectly okay. In fact, that would show that you in your mind are considering all the constraints that the problem has imposed on you, which is a very good thing. And that is something which software development is all about. Like in software engineering, it's not just the case that you are just given a problem statement and you need to write a code or write an app to solve that particular problem. No, that's not the case. The most of the time, the maximum amount of time in the software development process is consumed by discussions on the constraints, on the product constraints. Maybe your product needs to be very fast. Maybe your product needs to be scalable to 1 million users. So all these things. And when you admit that you did not consider these constraints while you were explaining the algorithm, that really shows that you are aware of the software development process in a way, like not exactly, but in a way, like you are aware of time constraints or different sorts of constraints which you are facing in the problem. Next is writing readable code. So this is something which I did not find a lot online, but I realized only after I interviewed a few students and I was given a checklist on the things on which I should mark the students on. And there was this section wherein it was written whether the code was readable or not. So you need to understand that programming languages, the high-level programming languages, aren't made for machines. They're actually made for humans. So that might sound paradoxical considering that the whole programming business is about computers. But no, like for computers, zeros and ones are enough. Like computer does not need to know different complicated syntaxes. Zeros and ones are enough. Machine language is enough for a computer. Why? So you need to realize why high-level languages were invented in the first place. They were invented so that humans could read the code, humans could evaluate the code easily, humans could debug the code easily and find out bugs even before they occur during runtime. Same is the case with the interview. So the interviewer continuously monitors the way you are writing code, and uh, due to because a lot of people come from competitive programming background, they are in a habit of uh, writing very short variable names, and variable names that aren't understandable to any other person except for the programmer. And even the programmer might forget what the variable was being used for if he sees his program, say, after a week or two. So during the interview, while the interviewer is monitoring your code, you are writing something in a very cryptic language in a way that only you understand, then you don't give the interviewer a chance to evaluate you on your uh, coding style or on your thought process. The way you code is quite an accurate representation of your thought process. So if you are coding in a very cryptic fashion, it shows that you are a very uh, like your thought process is also very cryptic. That may or may not be true, but yeah, you get the point. That generally gives off that feeling that, okay, this particular person has a distinct coding style and he might not be a team player, because in software development there are dozens of people working on an application at the same time, and you would want your code to be readable by everyone, readable in the first, like, that's the most ideal scenario, that a code is readable and understandable just in the first pass. So how to write readable code? So first of all, use proper variable names. Like, don't use variable names such as A, B, C, D, P, Q, R, S. Don't do that unless and until that problem itself has mentioned certain variables in that fashion. So if the problem says that you have a Q, like you have an array named A, then go ahead and use A as the variable name attached to an array. But if you are using things or constructs such as sum, or you are maintaining a cumulative sum, make sure you use the variable name sum, use the name sum as your variable name. Don't use S as the variable name for a location which you are using to store sum. So it's just that the programmer would get the interviewer would get an idea as to what you are doing, and he might even help you out in case you are making some mistake during the coding process. Make sure your code is indented. uh, like, I cannot emphasize it enough, but unindented code is really ugly, and you just get turned off while seeing that code. Like, I cannot, trust me, I cannot bear seeing unindented code. So make sure your code has proper indentation so that it conveys a logical structure. So if you have multiple nested ifs, or ifs followed by or fors, or multiple while loops, one inside the other, it gets really difficult to understand the flow of control if your code is not indented at all. If all your variables or all your statements start from the leftmost corner of the screen. So since white spaces do not matter, do not contribute to, they do not slow you down as far as time complexity is concerned, use them judiciously. Like, give give 4 spaces of indentation after every after you enter a particular scope. Then the last thing it might be the case that after you have written your code, you realize that, okay, this particular thing I could have written, this particular section of the code could have been written in a better way using some programming language feature which you are aware of, or just by moving few statements up and down. This process is called refactoring, and it's a good idea to refactor your code because it makes your code more obvious, and it also gives the interviewer an idea that you are concerned about the readability of your code. And the final thing, it's that you should ask for feedback. Like, after the interview has ended, the interviewer might have made up his mind. Like, in most of the cases, the interviewer has made up his mind by the end of your interview. So just take that as a moment to ask the interviewer whether like what were your shortcomings during the interview, what were the things that you missed or you should have done better. Also make it a point to ask the interviewer what were the things in your profile that he admired or what he liked a lot about you as a candidate. This so this makes so make sure each and every interview is a learning experience for you. It shouldn't be the case that okay, your interview went pretty badly and you just give up and you just forget what happened or what were your shortcomings or where you failed. Make sure you ask the interviewer and note those points down so that you do not repeat those mistakes in future. And sometimes a lot of times I've seen interviewers asking the candidate about, like, they ask that if you have any questions about the company, work culture, etc. Make sure, please utilize this time to get those details, because those details are often not available on the internet, and interviewers are more than willing to tell you about their work culture, the technologies they work on, and again, it gives out an impression that you are a serious candidate and you were really interested in his or her company. So that's it from my side. I'm open to questions, so you can ask anything about the interview process.
That was very insightful, Nilay, and we're really lucky to have you talk about all these things with us today. Nilay, there was a very interesting point you made during your presentation. And you said that, Nilay, can you just stop your presentation?
Okay, just a minute.
So there was a very interesting point that you made, and that was befriending the interviewer. You have to make friends with the interviewer. You have to believe that the interviewer is your friend. पर कई बार लोगों को कॉन्फिडेंस इतना नहीं आता to believe that the interviewer is basically on your side. They want to get a very good candidate. So, how do people get that confidence? How do interviewees get that confidence? If there are any tactics that you could share with us.
So one tactic that I employ while giving interviews is that I forget the person who is asking. I forget his face. Like, I don't see him often during the interview, and I just think that it's just my friend who is asking me a difficult question, maybe just in order to trouble me, or just for the sake of fun. So just consider the situation, that situation in which your best friend is asking the same question to you, maybe just to know that particular problem, so you would be motivated to explain him that situation. So that is the key. You have to explain your algorithm, you have to explain your solution. You do not have to answer it to your professor. The guy who is taking the interview is not a professor. He hasn't ever taught in a university. He's maybe 5 to 6 years older than you. So if you meet him in daily life, in a non-interview or an informal environment, you'll probably be happy to be friends with that guy. So just keep this in mind. The guy who is sitting in front of you isn't a professor. He isn't the expert in that field, and he isn't someone in front of whom you should be intimidated. Don't be intimidated. Just consider him as a friend. Just keep this mental model that suppose there was your best friend asking you this question, how would have behaved, or how would have answered that particular question.
Right. So I would invite the audience to ask any questions to Nilay. He's given a great presentation to all of us. He's shared some great insights with us. I would suggest that the audience asks questions to Nilay. But in the meantime, Nilay, I want to know something that you might have done in your college days that was something mischievous, because I'm sure that all of us have done, or all of us have those stories. So why don't you tell us something about your college days, some funny that you might have come up with?
So there are a lot of things which where I might not I'm not comfortable with sharing, but they were quite funny while I was in college. But there was this time which I really enjoyed a lot was when we applied for ICPC and we had this we had the first round of ICPC. So what we decided was that we won't give our exam, the ICPC competition inside our dorm rooms. What we decided was that we'll go to a friend's house. We were I think 8 or 10 of us, and we decided that we'll enjoy, we'll eat lots of food, and then maybe a few hours in between we'll code, we'll try to solve certain problems. So we weren't really great at competitive programming, but yeah, we were quite like the sort of confidence which you have when you are not aware of the scale or the magnitude of problem. We had that sort of confidence, so we were very confident that okay, we'll क्या हुआ कि हमने competitive programming नहीं किया, but we are sure going to crack ICPC in the first go without any practice. It was a really fun time. I wouldn't advise anyone watching this webinar to sit with a lot of friends, a dozen of your friends, and try to give ICPC or any other competitive programming contest. Don't do that. But that is one thing which I remember from back from my college days. That is a moment which I enjoyed quite a lot.
That's great, Nilay. So all of us have kind of sometimes done all these things in life. Of course, not advisable maybe, but it's fun to know these questions, these things, right? So we have a question in the audience. Nikita has a question. She asks, "What is the difference between a good employee and an extraordinary employee?"
So difference between a good employee and an extraordinary employee. So the thing is, since I am also like I have an experience of 1 year, so I'm still figuring it out. But from the people which I have seen around at my workplace, the difference between a good employee and an extraordinary employee is that the extraordinary employee knows that he's working with real, actual human beings. They are not machines. So he has a good personality. He knows how to connect different people. Like it isn't obvious during the college days that how important human to human interaction or programmer to programmer interaction is. You might have the picture, like students have this picture that a programmer is someone who is sitting with his hoodie on, sitting in a dark room with a green terminal on, sipping up coffee and writing code all through the night. That's not what is required at a company. As I said during the presentation, the maximum amount of time, the most amount of time is spent talking to different people. And if you have that ability, if you have that personality that you can bond with the other person, and if you can see, and if you are confident enough, and if to ask him why this particular thing isn't working, and you're free and you are happy, and you aren't shy about asking other people when you are about the mistakes which you have made, and you certainly admit your mistakes. I think that's the difference between an extraordinary employee and a good employee. See, programming is something which all employees would know in a company. So all of them have gone through the same rigorous interview process. The difference between those two categories of employees is just a matter of personality and also a matter of his ethics, I think.
Okay, Nilay. So we have a question here in the audience again. Prudvi Raju asks, what is the one advice you would give to students who haven't done any projects, but they are good with their technical, they want to be good with their technical interviews?
Okay, so if you haven't done projects, so see, the idea behind doing projects is that the interviewer wants to know if you have solved some problem with your programming skills, first of all. And the second, he wants to understand how passionate you are about computer science. No one would want to hire a person who is sitting in interview just for the sake of sitting, and he isn't really interested in computer science, or maybe he wants to do something else in life. I mean, that's okay. A lot of people switch careers after joining the IT sector, but don't convey. It's not advisable to convey that those plans just during the interview. So that's the idea behind looking at the projects. If you have something, if you have a way which you can think of to convey to the interviewer that you are very passionate about programming, then that's, I think that's wonderful. I mean, that's you don't require projects in that scenario, because in the end, like, no company would be interested in looking at a to-do list app. Like, they are not looking to acquire your projects or buy you out. So they're just looking for that passion. So though, how and what are the ways in which you can convey uh, that passion? Uh, that's pretty subjective. But on the top of my head, I can think of things like uh, conducting a sort of a tutorial, writing tutorials, writing blogs on different portals such as Geeks for Geeks. Geeks for Geeks has a good blog. Similarly, Hacker Earth also has this facility for writing blogs. It invites participants or invites platform users to write something about their programming experiences. So it need not be a full-scale project. You can even write about programming language features, such as, if I talk about JavaScript, I love this feature called closures in JavaScript. I can write an essay on on closures uh, at any moment. So if you write that out, that's a very good thing. That conveys your passion. So in that scenario, I don't think you would require a project, but still, it's advisable to do a project if you find time, and if you don't, then that's okay.
Okay. We have another question here. Shitinjay Kumar wants to know that if a billing system project using Python is good to mention in their resume. He's done it himself and he wants to know from you if that's good enough to put it on his resume.
Trust me, any project is good enough if you know all the internals, all the problems associated with building that project. Suppose you say build a calculator, a simple calculator that does not even have a GUI, and it just you take in numbers and input, and you just output the sum of those two numbers. Even that is good enough if you can elucidate, or if you can tell the interviewer what sort of things you were planning in future. So suppose if I have just like 1 or 2 hours, and in those 2 hours I'll be giving an interview, and I just need to make sure that I have some sort of a project on my profile. So maybe what I'll do is I'll make a simple calculator app that takes in certain numbers and certain operations, and then outputs the result of that operation. What I need to emphasize on is the problems which I faced while developing that product. So those problems could be directly related to the field of computing, or making calculators or calculator programs. And these could be things from how to, how to deal with the BODMAS rule, how to assign priorities to different operations, and things like that. How am I going to implement those things? And it could also be on the technical aspects, such as uh, how do I take input from the user in the browser. I know, I mean, this is a very slippery slope argument, in the sense that I'm just giving you a very bare bones project, like a calculator with no GUI. Of course, no one would be, I wouldn't advise anyone to just go with a calculator without any GUI. So I mean, the point which I wanted to emphasize on was the fact that the interviewer is interested in knowing how engrossed you were while developing that project. So if you were completely engrossed, then you will know what problems people face while developing those applications. You know what problems are there from user perspective, and you should know solutions which you can say that you will implement in future. So all projects are good enough. There's no project that is okay, that's too simple to do. Just make sure that you have those proper points written down in your resume about that project.
That makes sense. So, Nilay, we have a lot of young, aspiring software developers here watching us. And what is that one advice you would give to all those young software developers who are trying to dream high, who are trying to get their place sorted at a very big organization? What would you advise?
This question makes me feel really old. Just 23 years old. Even I'm an aspiring software developer, and I want to like
But a
go
lot
to the
of
higher
young
echelons. But yeah, I get that question. Like, yeah, the single most important advice I'll give to uh, students or recent graduates is that be patient. Uh, there, I mean, it might be the case that you will find your friends getting placed into good companies and you are not even getting a single opportunity to showcase your skills. It happens, and it will happen a lot in your life, even when you are in a good company. Even if you get into a company like Google, you'll find instances wherein a person you think is not of as is who is not as good a software developer as you are, getting promoted way ahead of you. It happens in all domains of life. So in those situations, all you need to do is to be patient. Wait for your opportunities. Opportunities will come your way, and you should be ready for it. You should be ready to just pounce on that single interview which you get, and just give your best during those times. Don't worry if you are not getting placed, and that's perfectly okay. That happens with a lot of candidates. In fact, I'll tell you that one of the best competitive programmers in my batch didn't get like he wasn't placed for a long time. He didn't even get a PPO from the company he did his internship from. He wasn't placed for a long time, and when he got placed into a company which did not have a very good reputation. But still, he never lost heart, and he's an inspiring figure to me, to be honest. And now he is in one of those firms which pays a lot. So yeah, so if you have the skills, just be patient. In the long run, you'll get to the point where you which you deserve.
Right, Nilay. That was amazing. Yeah, it was great talking to you, Nilay. I think
Thank you.
we have exhausted the questions from the audience as well. It's been wonderful talking to you today, and I hope we keep in touch and keep talking about you know
Definitely.
technical interviews all the time. Cool.
Definitely.
Thanks, Nilay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.